Have you ever missed someone so intensely that it felt like a piece of you was ripped away the moment they left? Have you found yourself going through photos, old messages, memories on loop, wondering if you made a mistake? Or worse, if you were the mistake? Have you laid awake at night asking yourself, why does it hurt so much? Why can't I move on? Carl Jung, the pioneering mind behind analytical psychology, believed that when something hurts, it's trying to tell you something. And often, it's not about what you think you lost. It's about who you think you were when you had it. You don't miss them. You miss you. Not the current you, aching in absence, clinging to hope. You miss the version of yourself that existed in their presence. The you who felt chosen, desired, validated, seen. The you who laughed more, dreamed more, felt alive. And that's what most people are really grieving when a relationship ends. Not just the other person, but the mirror they once held, the identity you wore when you were with them. And when that person leaves, so does the reflection, so does the version of you that felt worthy. This is where Jung steps in. His concept of the persona, the mask we wear in society, explains that we often create roles in relationships. You become the one they love, the one who makes them happy, the savior, the loyal one. And while those roles are emotionally rewarding, they can also be fragile, because they exist only as long as the other person validates them. When that relationship ends, the role dissolves, and you're left staring at the silence, wondering not just where they went, but where you went. Let's be honest. Most breakups aren't just about losing someone, they're about losing access to a version of yourself that only seemed to exist with them. That might sound romantic, but it's dangerous, because it means your sense of self was built on something external, and that's why you spiral when they leave. You're not just mourning a person, you're mourning the emotional home you built inside their presence. And without that home, you feel like a wanderer, lost, unanchored. Jung would call this a projection. You projected your worth onto them, your confidence, your happiness. And now that they're gone, the projection collapses. But that collapse is not a tragedy. It's an invitation. Because here's the truth most people avoid. If someone made you feel valuable, that value didn't come from them. It came from within you. They just helped you access it. They triggered it, but it was always yours. Jung believed that relationships serve as mirrors for the unconscious. They show you what you believe about yourself, about love, about your worth. So if being with them made you feel whole, ask yourself, why couldn't I feel whole without them? What did they awaken that I believed I couldn't give myself? Take, for instance, a woman named Leah. She dated someone for 2 years, and after the breakup, she couldn't stop crying. But when asked what exactly she missed, she said, I miss how confident I felt when he looked at me like I was the only person in the world. In other words, she didn't miss him as much as she missed the her that existed when she was seen through his eyes. This is common, and it's why so many people jump from relationship to relationship, not to find love, but to find themselves again, to feel alive again, to reclaim the feelings they once had, mistaking the other person as the source instead of the trigger. But this is where growth begins. Jung believed that suffering is meaningful, that every emotional wound is an opening, a passage into deeper self-awareness. And in the pain of heartbreak, there is a chance to find something far more enduring than any relationship, your core self. Because once you realize that who you were with them was always within you, you begin to reclaim your power. You stop waiting for someone to make you feel seen. You start seeing yourself. You stop chasing external love to validate internal worth. You start cultivating self-connection. And that's not easy, because the mind will tempt you to go backward, to revisit the fantasy, to reread old messages and reinterpret silence as something tender. It will whisper that maybe you just misunderstood them. Maybe if you'd been more patient, more beautiful, more chill, more mysterious, they would have stayed. Maybe, just maybe, you ruined it. But that's not your soul speaking, that's your wound. It's the part of you that learned to equate love with effort, that still believes love must be earned, that fears being abandoned so deeply that it would rather rewrite history than accept its truth. And this is the exact moment, the threshold between relapse and rebirth, where healing truly begins. The you that was validated by their eyes, the you who felt chosen when they said your name. That part of you is still searching, not for them, but for the feeling. And if you can tend to that part, if you can sit beside the ache instead of running from it, everything changes. Instead of asking, how do I get them back? You start asking, what did they awaken in me that I now need to claim as mine? Because what they gave you wasn't theirs to keep. The confidence, the joy, the spark you felt, it didn't come from them, it came from you. They were just the mirror. You were the light. This shift in perspective is everything. Instead of crying over who left, you begin nurturing the parts of you that stayed, the resilient parts, the hopeful parts, the part that still wants to love and be loved, because that part of you, that's sacred, that's not broken, that's brave. Here's what no one tells you. You are allowed to miss the feeling without missing the person. You're allowed to grieve the identity you had when you were with them, even if they weren't right for you. You're allowed to miss the laughter, the excitement, the way they made you feel seen, even if the rest of the relationship was filled with confusion or pain. Grief doesn't always make sense. Healing doesn't follow a script. You can hold conflicting truths. You can miss someone and still know they weren't meant for you. You can mourn the fantasy while thanking reality for waking you up. And you're allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that only knew love through someone else's eyes. Carl Jung believed that our greatest task is not to find love or happiness, but to become whole. He called this individuation, the process of integrating all the parts of ourselves, light and dark, wounded and wise, into a complete, authentic self. But individuation often starts in heartbreak, in the breakdown of identity, in the moment when everything you thought you were falls apart. You were their partner, their confidant, their favorite, and then you were no one, or so it feels. That fall, that's your initiation. Because only when the external roles dissolve do you finally meet the person underneath, the real you, not the performer, not the pleaser, not the projection of someone else's desire, but the you that was always there, waiting beneath the surface. And that self, that is the one who deserves your loyalty. Not the version of you who begged to be chosen. Not the one who lost herself in trying to become whatever they needed. Not the one who thought shrinking would make you easier to hold. But the version who rises from loss, the one who chooses herself, the one who says, I won't abandon myself just because someone else did. So no, you don't miss them. You miss the reflection you saw in their eyes. You miss the certainty, the feeling of belonging, even if it was temporary. You miss who you were when you believed you were enough. And let's be honest, that feeling is intoxicating. The feeling of mattering, of being seen, of feeling like someone chose you in a world that too often overlooks you. But here's the truth that healing reveals. That sense of mattering has never left. It's still there. It was never tied to them. It lives inside you. It's the part of you that dares to love again, that part that hopes, that dreams, that still believes in connection, even after being cracked open. They didn't create that light, they simply reflected it. And now, without their presence, without their validation, without the illusion, you finally have the chance to find it for real, to find it in yourself. That's not just healing. That's liberation. That's the moment when the cycle ends, when you no longer confuse chemistry with love, when you no longer chase people who leave you guessing, when you no longer mistake longing for depth. You stop searching for yourself in someone else's story and start writing your own. You stop performing, you stop begging, you stop bending until you break just to keep someone near, and you start coming home. Jung would tell you, the shadow, the parts of yourself you reject, will run your life until you make it conscious. And right now, in this heartbreak, your shadow is calling. It's showing you where you lost yourself, where you gave too much, where you believed love was something to be earned, not received. But it's also showing you where your power lives, in the very wound that broke you open, in the ache that forced you to look inward, in the silence where you finally heard your own voice again. Because the truth is, heartbreak is not an ending, it's a doorway to your deepest self, and walking through it is the most courageous thing you will ever do. It means sitting in the stillness, feeling the ache, letting go of the illusion. It means grieving not just the person, but the version of yourself that thought you couldn't live without them. It means releasing the identity that was tethered to their gaze, their approval, their love. This isn't just emotional pain, it's ego death. It's the unraveling of who you thought you needed to be in order to be loved. And when you lose that false identity, you don't just cry for them, you cry for you. For the years you spent bending, contorting, performing. For the you that thought love meant sacrifice. That thought being chosen was the same as being valued. But here's the truth. What you grieve in heartbreak is often not the loss of another, but the loss of who you believed you were in their arms. And yet, from that grief comes a rare kind of freedom. Because once you've tasted what it means to sit with your pain and not run, you discover something radical. Slowly, quietly, fiercely. You realize you can live without them. You realize you were always enough. Your worth, it is not up for negotiation. Your love, it is not something to be earned. Your presence, it is not a burden, it is a gift. And when that realization roots itself inside you, not just in your thoughts, but in your bones, everything shifts. You stop craving what hurt you. You stop reaching for hands that let go. You stop chasing the feeling that someone else made you feel, because now you make yourself feel it. You become the source. You become the mirror. You become the one who stays. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "No person is free who is not master of himself." This is what mastery begins to look like. Not cold detachment, but conscious self-return. You stop handing your emotional thermostat to people who don't know how to hold warmth. You stop outsourcing your sense of meaning to someone who barely understood your depth. You begin to nourish yourself in places you once starved. You start honoring the small rituals that reconnect you to your inner world. Journaling in silence, walking under trees, cooking your favorite meal, crying without shame. These are the acts of reclamation, not grand gestures, but tiny, holy rebellions against the part of you that still believes love must come from someone else. And this work isn't pretty, it's not Instagrammable. Healing is messy, it's lonely. There will be days you want to call them just to remember what it felt like to be wanted. But in that moment, you pause, you breathe, and you remember you were never really missing them. You were missing who you got to be around them. And now, You are learning to become that version on your own. Imagine this. You're sitting alone at your kitchen table. A song plays that once belonged to you two. The wave hits, the memories flood in. But instead of numbing, you stay. You let the tears come. You whisper to yourself, I am here. I am whole. That moment? That's rebirth. You stop asking, why didn't they choose me? And begin asking, why did I think their choice determined my value? You stop building altars to people who made you feel hard to love and start building altars to your own heart. Because Carl Jung never asked us to become perfect. He asked us to become real, integrated, whole. He said, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. And now, after everything, after the heartbreak, after the sleepless nights, after the overthinking, and the attempts to fix what was never yours to fix, you are beginning to make a different kind of choice, a quiet, powerful one. You are choosing to become the kind of person who no longer abandons herself just to be loved by someone else. That's not an easy decision. For most of your life, you may have learned that love required sacrifice, that being wanted meant becoming what others needed you to be, that being lovable meant being less needy, less emotional, more agreeable, more pleasing. And for a long time, that worked, at least on the surface. You might have had moments where you felt wanted, where the attention of someone else made you feel alive again. But deep down, that version of love always came with conditions, conditions that slowly and sometimes silently chipped away at your sense of self. Now, for the first time, you're seeing the cost. You're noticing the pattern. You're waking up to the reality that in order to be loved by them, you often had to leave parts of yourself behind. And even though they might have given you affection, it never felt, yes, safe, consistent, or whole. So now you're choosing something different. You're choosing to stay with yourself, not just when you're confident, not just when you're succeeding, not just when people are clapping for you, but even when you're vulnerable, grieving, or uncertain. You're learning to love yourself in the absence of applause. You're practicing self-respect even when no one else is validating it. You're learning to sit with your feelings, not because it feels good, but because it's the only way to stop abandoning your own heart. Psychologists talk about this as emotional reparenting, the process of giving yourself the kind of care, attention, and love that you may not have received consistently growing up. Research in attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, has shown us that many of our adult relationships reflect the attachment patterns we developed in early childhood. If love felt conditional, unpredictable, or absent during those formative years, you may find yourself drawn to similar dynamics in adulthood, not because they're healthy, but because they're familiar. And so the cycle repeats. You keep chasing people who give you just enough to keep you hooked, but not enough to feel secure. Your brain, wired for survival, misinterprets this anxiety as chemistry. That's why safe, consistent love can often feel boring at first. It doesn't activate the fight or flight system. It doesn't mimic the emotional roller coaster you've grown used to. But the truth is, consistency isn't boring, it's healing, and you're beginning to understand that now. Instead of seeing your emotions as something to hide, you're learning to sit with them. Instead of thinking your sadness makes you weak, you're realizing it's a sign of depth. Instead of shaming yourself for still missing them, you're starting to understand that grief is not a flaw. It's proof that you cared, that you gave your heart, and that you're human. This process of turning inward is what Carl Jung called individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming the person you were always meant to be, beneath the masks, the conditioning, and the projections. Jung believed that pain is not the enemy of transformation, it is the doorway. In his words, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You're no longer running from the ache. You're listening to it. You're asking what it's trying to teach you. And what you're discovering is profound. You were never truly lost. You were simply buried under years of performance, years of trying to be good enough, years of believing that love required self-erasure. But the real you, the whole, unfiltered, intuitive, sensitive, strong version of you has been here the entire time, waiting patiently to be acknowledged. You're coming home now, not to a person, not to a relationship, not to a romantic ideal, but to yourself. That self, the one you silenced to keep others comfortable, is the one who deserves your loyalty. She's the one who deserves your commitment. She's the one who's been carrying you through your hardest moments without asking for recognition, and now you're starting to see her, to speak kindly to her, to trust her. And it's in that moment, when you begin to look in the mirror and see yourself not as broken, not as too much, not as hard to love, but simply as worthy, whole, and in progress, that everything shifts. Neuroscience even backs this up. When you practice self-compassion, studies show that the brain lights up in areas associated with caregiving and emotional regulation. You become calmer, more balanced, more resilient. You don't just feel better, you actually become better equipped to deal with future emotional stress. The late psychologist Dr. Kristin Neff, a pioneer in self-compassion research, said, "With self-compassion, we give ourselves the same kindness and care we'd give to a good friend. This seems simple, but most of us never learned how. We were taught to be kind to others, but not to ourselves. We were told not to be selfish, not to make it about us. But if you don't learn to give yourself the love you're always seeking, you'll forever depend on others to do it for you. And no matter how good they are, they'll never be able to fill the space only you were meant to occupy. So now you stop trying to get back what you lost. You stop trying to recreate the old version of yourself who only felt worthy when someone else saw her that way. And instead, you begin creating a new foundation, one where your value isn't dependent on being chosen, but on being known by yourself. In that space, something new begins to grow, something soft, something strong. You start to crave peace over passion, clarity over confusion, consistency over chaos. You start to feel more grounded. You start to enjoy your own company. You start to create, not from a place of needing to be seen, but from a place of already feeling seen by you. And that's when you realize you're not healing, so you can attract them back. You're healing so you never again forget your worth just because someone else couldn't see it. Jung would not tell you to avoid love. He would not ask you to become cold or detached. He would invite you to see love as a mirror, not a rescue mission. He would encourage you to see every relationship as a lesson, every wound as an invitation, and every heartbreak as a door that leads back to the soul. And now that door is wide open. You're finally coming home, home to the self that never stopped believing in you, home to the love that was never outside of you, but always within. Home to the truth that you are not too much, too emotional, too sensitive, you are just enough. You're no longer searching in someone else's eyes to find yourself. You're no longer begging to be seen. Because now you see you, and when you say, "There you are, I thought I lost you," you're not saying it to someone else. You're saying it to yourself. And in that moment, when you see yourself not as broken, but as someone who is finally returning to their own heart, that's when you stop missing them. Not because the memory fades, not because the pain disappears, but because you finally understand you never really needed them. You just needed you. And now you've come home.